Hi, and thanks for watching another instructional video for CSCI 1300. In this video, we will cover the use of the for loop and how it relates to other loops like the while loop. The for loop is considered a count-controlled loop, and you could do the same operation in the for loop with a while loop using a counter or some variable, such as a number, that could reach some terminating condition. Since this is such a common type of loop, the for loop was created to specifically handle this type of operation. The for loop consists of three arguments which will be declared and passed into the parentheses instead of the terminating condition only in a while loop. In a for loop, you have three sections. The first section pertains to the initialization of a variable which will count towards some terminating conditions. This is the counter that we would use outside of a while loop when we declare it. So in this example, with the for loop, we can declare our counter scope specifically to the for loop. The I that we declare here in the first part of our for loop line is only available inside of the brackets of our for loop. It only resides within the loop itself and cannot be accessed anywhere else in the program. The second portion after the semicolon relates to the terminating condition of what will allow our loop to stop performing the contents of the body of the loop itself. So based on the variable that we declare in the first condition, the second condition will tell us how long the operation will last in the loop and at what point it will end. And lastly, after the second semicolon in the third area, we have some increment or incrementation of the initialized variable. So we declare I and set it to some value. So we initialize and declare I in the first part. We then give I some terminating condition, so a stop position or wherever it will cease to finish its task. And lastly, we'll have some incremental way of increasing I or decreasing I towards its terminating condition. For loops can be set up in both a positive and a negative direction. So you could start with a large number and go to a small number, or you could start from a small number and go to a larger number, or start with a range and only do some kind of iteration over a range of values. So let's go into some code and check out how this relates to while loops. While loops can be set up as count controlled, but you have to declare some variable outside of the while loop, then use that variable to control the terminating condition of the loop, and then inside of the body of your loop you will have to increment the terminating counter in some way. This is no longer something that happens within the loop specifically. Because counter is declared outside of the loop, this is one major drawback to making a while loop a count-controlled type of loop. With a for loop, we can initialize a variable in the first section, set it to some value by declaring and initializing it, then give it some terminating condition, and then increment it by some value. We don't necessarily have to increment by 1 by saying I++ or variable ++. We could also say that the variable is equal to itself plus 2. There are multiple ways to do this. You can change the way that you do the counting operation in multiple ways. So the beauty about for loops is that they're very flexible. You can set them on a range. You can set them to go up or down depending on how you start the initialization of the counter. And you can have a little bit more control over them. So in this particular example, both of these pieces of code actually perform the same operation. And if I were to run the code here in the terminal, you would notice that we get the same output. However, the beautiful thing about for loops is that we have some flexibility. And let me explain this here. Say we wanted to set I equal to 10, and we wanted I to go to 1 instead, and we wanted to print in reverse. Well, we'd have to change a couple of things in our for loop. So what I had to do to change this so that it would start from a large number and go to a small number when printing is that I would have to initialize and declare I to some large value, whatever the highest value is you want to start with. And then i's terminating condition will be that I will continue to loop as long as I is greater than or equal to 1. So if we have a large number that's larger than 1, we can continue to print as long as I does not decrease to the value of 1. And lastly, here in the third section, we're decrementing I by 1 every time the loop executes. So if I were to run this now, let's see what we get. You can see that we're printing from 10 to 1 in reverse order. And if we wanted to do other things, we could also change this as well. Say we wanted to decrease I by 2. We can do that as well. And it would only print the even or the odd numbers. And that is another way to deal with for loops. For loops are really handy. They're great for dealing with strings and arrays and other things where you have to go over some values over and over and over again, searching for things. And with that, I think that we've covered everything about initializing and declaring for loops. Thanks for watching, and happy coding.